Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining today's discussion on the 2025 State of DevOps Report webinar with conversation with Deloitte and Google. So glad you could be with us. My name's Josh Moore. I'm a senior manager out of our Chicago office in our Deloitte consulting practice, and I'm focused on large-scale product transformation in the financial services industry. I also have the privilege of leading a lot of our eminence and thought leadership when it comes to DevX and resiliency and these sorts of conversations, and really excited to be on this conversation today. I'll turn it over to Eddie next.
Yes, hi, thank you, Josh. So I'm Eddie Krumholz. I am a technology fellow with the firm, and I'm the domain CTO and part of the engineering as a service practice. And I am also leading the developer experience practice in itself. I'm a full stack software developer and have helped develop a lot of assets and accelerators for the firm for the last 8 years in DevOps, SRE, observability, and AI. Have over 35 years of experience, 15 of those at NASA, working on robotic missions, International Space Station, and the shuttle program, as well as many commercial sectors. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion. I pass this to Eric.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Maxwell. I'm working with Google inside the Google Cloud consulting organization. I run a consulting practice that we call 10x Technology. We focus on DevOps and platform engineering and how do you drive transformation inside of your organization using things like DORA and culture and process and technology. So I'm also part of the DORA team. I'm one of the researchers and one of the authors of the work that we do. Previous to this, I was with Chef Software, and I started my customer-facing career in 2015 with Chef, leading companies through their DevOps transformations. So nice to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Eddie and Eric. Yeah, so just a little bit of housekeeping and agenda before we kick off the conversation today. The way our time together will be structured is we obviously have gone through the welcome and introductions already. We're going to hear a summary from Eric regarding just the key themes that were part of this year's DORA report. And then we're going to be turning to a discussion and really kind of interview style between Eddie and Eric, diving into these three key themes for AI-assisted software delivery. And then we'll also be taking 10 minutes at the end for questions. So the Q&A feature should be available to you all. We welcome questions as we go through the discussion. We'll be collecting those, and then we'll have time at the end to discuss those. Additionally, I think you may have heard this as you joined. Today's webinar will be recorded and will be shared. And then I'd say just in general, if there are any other questions you have, or if you want to connect with us, please scan this QR code, and we'd love to discuss with you offline. So with that being said, I'll now turn it over to Eric to talk about the key themes from this year's report.
Sure, yeah, thank you. So I'll just kind of briefly touch on these key themes here, and then as we go through the webinar, we'll dive deeper into each of these different topics here. So the first one really is that success is much more than just the key metrics. And so one of the things that we introduced this year was different clusters and different ways of looking at team performance. In the past, we had measured things and measured teams saying things like low, medium, high, elite performers, and that was almost exclusively centered around the DORA metrics. And so this year we wanted to go above and beyond that because, as we know, it's much more than just metrics. And one of the things that I always like to say with customers when I'm working with them is, don't focus too much on the metrics. Let's focus more on the capabilities and on the things that drive the metrics, and let's just use those metrics as a gauge. So we've greatly expanded that. I'm excited to talk about that. The second point is that AI adoption is quite universal. Everyone is doing it. However, not everyone is being successful. And so what we did this year was we really wanted to unpack what were the different capabilities that would drive and amplify that AI success, and also try to understand some of the potential pitfalls and how you can not only drive adoption, but also drive trust and reliance and reflexive use of AI. And then finally, we dug into platform engineering again, which was a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And what we found was that the internal platform is a strategic enabler for your organization and really unlocks the organizational performance that AI can bring. If you want to go to the next slide. All right, so now we'll talk about software delivery performance. So like I mentioned, we wanted to go beyond just the key metrics. Previously, it was the four key metrics. After testing last year the idea of rework, we decided to add rework to the core model this year. So now it's actually five key metrics that we talk about. But we wanted to go beyond that, and we wanted to really understand what are all of the things that enable teams and organizations to be successful. And so what we looked at this year was a combination of the factors that you see on the screen. We wanted to understand the level of friction that teams were encountering. We wanted to understand the amount of time that teams were doing or spending doing valuable work. We also wanted to understand individual effectiveness. We used to call this productivity. We now call it individual effectiveness. And then, of course, from a software delivery perspective, we continue to understand the speed and stability, or instability rather. And then, of course, we look at burnout and product performance as well as team performance. So what we did this year was we looked at all of these factors together, and we built out, well, we didn't build, we actually let the data build out clusters. And so if you go to the next slide, what the data showed was that there were seven main clusters that kind of emerged. And these really tell the story of different types of teams, again, going beyond those four metrics. A lot of times, you know, when I work with engineering teams, they they would look at the metrics as something of a maturity model. And a lot of times they would put goals for the teams around the metrics and say something to the effect of, you know, we're going to be, you know, we have a mandate this year to be a high performing organization or an elite performing organization. And they were really just referring to those DORA four key metrics. But what our research has shown over the years, and of course what I've seen anecdotally, and Eddie, I'm sure you've seen this as well, it's much more than just speed and stability. It's how do all of these things interoperate and work together. I'm curious, Eddie, what are you seeing in the like in the field with regards to sort of the way that teams are thinking about this holistic transformation?
Yes, good question, Eric. If you want, actually, we can go to the next slide because I think that that will tell a little bit better the story, right? Which is, you know, what we see in here, for example, is clusters 6 and 7 are the ones that are demonstrating the most success, showing high speed, high quality, as a whole. But you know what is really interesting is that best organizations that we see out there, many of my clients are actually showing us that you don't really need to pick between speed versus quality, and they are proving that it's totally possible to have both speed and delivery and high quality to coexist. So there is not a choice either one anymore. If you want to go to the next slide, I can provide a little bit more insight. So in the past, teams were often really very uniform in terms of skill set, and they were, you know, closely directed by a team led by a scrum master and focused on delivery effort based on hours or story points or things like that. So at Deloitte, we have developed a pod delivery model, which is intended to rethink a lot of this, right? So Deloitte's pod delivery model really centers on more small, autonomous, cross-functional teams, and it sounds very agile, right? Of course, to drive project outcomes. But in the pod structure, we we have this idea to boost more creativity and efficiency and a sense of ownership, matching clear objectives with more of a flexible team structures that align to project needs. And this approach really supports the delivery of excellence and agility and can be adapted depending on the specific goals and challenges of a project or organization. Uh,
That's
yeah.
that's pretty cool. And one additional thing that I noticed this year in those charts that we were showing previously was that, to your point, speed and stability are definitely go hand in hand. This is often something that customers, when I work with them, initially they think is going to be a trade-off where they think, hey, if we go fast, we're going to have to sacrifice stability, or if we want to maximize stability, we have to sacrifice speed. But we definitely see those going hand in hand. The other thing that I think was interesting is that with the highest performing teams, we also don't see any sacrifice around friction, burnout, or time doing valuable work. So it's almost like the highest performing teams really have their cake and they also get to eat it. I think those two high clusters, 6 and 7, accounted for like 40% of the responders of this year's survey. And so that's actually really promising because, that means that 40% of the teams are really kind of working as a well-oiled machine, which I think is pretty exciting. Um, with regards to this pod model, Eddie, can you kind of share some examples of how this pod model has been used on different projects? Like, are there any examples that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you flip to the next slide, please? So each pod type is a little bit different, right? And they can vary in terms of composition, duration, and what they actually focus on, whether it is during design or delivery or ongoing support. And really at the end, by choosing the right combination of pods for a project, we can really optimize that agile delivery and set ourselves for best possible outcomes. So as I mentioned, right, pods are a modern response to the need for agile, adaptable project delivery teams, especially where traditional hierarchical teams can fall short. So there are a couple of uh, typical pods that we develop, right? So with and some of their characteristics. So first is cross-functional teams. So each pod really includes members with various skill sets. So it can be developers or testers or analysts, architects, UX designers. And this allows pods to tackle more end-to-end projects and priorities without really having heavy dependencies on external groups. Second characteristic is that they have autonomy and ownership. So they have the authority to make any day-to-day decisions and resolve issues without excessive escalation. And they are very outcome focused rather than just logging hours or story points are really aligned to specific business outcomes or deliverables. And they are working on iterative ways, right? So this is very agile, of course, as you can hear, but um, structures are not one size fits all. So the way that we have it is, for example, for project initiation and discovery, we may have a small pod that includes a business analyst, a solution architect, and a product owner, and sometimes with a lightweight technical representation that focuses on rapid exploration, proof of concept, requirements, discovery, as well as stakeholder alignment. And one of the advantages is that then you have the ability to quickly validate assumptions before you get any larger investments. On the other hand, once you start with more like the delivery or the build phase, then the pod expands a little bit, right? And so you may have additional developers, testers, DevOps specialists, and other roles such as Scrum Masters or product leads that can coordinate maybe even multiple pods. And the focus here is to be more have a more robust incremental delivery of features with tight integration and quality cycles. Now, there are other types like what we call hypercare, which is more post go live, where the pod is more reshaped and is reduced in size and focused more on monitoring and bug fixes and critical support. So the skill mix may tilt more towards operations and monitoring and rapid response. So here the advantage is that you have more of a quick turnaround for urgent issues and seamless stabilization of new solutions. And then at the end, you also have a lot of specialty scenarios, right? So you may have innovation pods or even regulatory or audit pods. So in an innovation pod, you may have, what we call strike teams for things like hackathons or R&D kind of situations. And on a regulatory side, you may be more focused on compliance, documentation, and things like that. And now there is another last one, which is also what we call a scenario where you may have a large data scale transformation initiative where you may start with an initiation pod, you may follow with a delivery pod, and you may finish with a hypercare pod. So this is how we have been implementing pods and very successfully have that cake and eat it too, like you mentioned as well. So I pass this back to you, Eric. Any questions, or we can jump to the artificial intelligence side?
Yeah, let's jump into the AI stuff because I think that a lot of people are probably anxious to hear about this research that we did this year. So let's just start with adoption. I don't think this is really any groundbreaking news here, but AI is really catching on. People are adopting this at a rapid pace. Most people have over 1 year's worth of hands-on experience with AI at this point. So, I mean, I don't know about you, Eddie, but every customer that I work with is certainly going full steam ahead into AI. Does this also echo what you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think every conversation that we have, whether it's DevOps or SRE or just software development, the conversation cannot start without talking about AI, right? That is a super hot topic, but like you mentioned earlier, one thing is to talk about it, and the other one is successful doing it. And that's where we see a lot of hiccups, right? They know the fad, they have been using Gen AI or ChatGPT, or they have been migrating a little bit more towards having chat boxes or things like chatbots or things like that. But people are starting to struggle on how to really find use cases where they can implement AI and creating the foundational elements actually for AI to be productive.
Yeah, exactly. So let's move on to the next slide and we can dig into some of what you just said. Um, so first, let's talk about reliance on AI. So I guess let me just back up for a second. In the research, we'll talk about the concept of AI adoption. So it's important to ground on what exactly are we talking about when we say AI adoption. So when we say AI adoption, we're talking about three things that all sort of interlink or interoperate. It's the trust in AI, the reliance on AI, and then the reflexive use of AI, meaning that when you have a problem to solve, do you reflexively turn to try to solve that problem with AI? So let's talk about reliance on AI first. So a pretty large majority, 65% of those folks that we surveyed indicate that they are, really relying on AI for software development. 37% of those report reliance at a moderate amount. 20% say that they are relying on it a lot, and 8% said a great deal. And all out of all of that, 95% of people that responded to our survey said that they are, to some extent, relying on AI. So that's a very, very large percentage. When we break down the different types of tasks that people are using AI for, the top three that we saw, and we published this in the report, an entire list. I forget how many different tasks there were, but we studied basically as many as we could think of, at least 20 or more. But the top three in order were writing code. So that was the first one. I think that's probably not that surprising to most people. Number two was literature review, and number three was creating new images. Is that kind of in line with what you see, Eddie, in the field with kind of how people are using these tools currently? Is it mostly code generation?
Yeah, I will say that, the way that we see it is definitely on the code generation, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail in the next slides where we look at code generation, but really more from an overall software development lifecycle standpoint, where there is more than just developers, there is a lot of other personas. And the other area where I am seeing a lot of movement is on the business side of things, like how do you enable agents to develop, execute particular business functions, right? And there are some assets and accelerators that the firm has developed in that area as well, right? I guess the move in general is that in the past and still in the present, right? Humans are the main delivery driver, right? Where with the promise of agentic is that then you will start having more agents doing the work, where humans are providing the insights, the coaching, and the tailoring, as well as providing the innovation and the acumen. But you're right. I mean, the main area that we're seeing is in the area of software development as well.
Yeah, and so it's one thing to adopt and to rely on, but all of this would be for naught if you're not gaining some sort of productivity gain from it. I mean, this is, why we're doing this. So if you jump to the next slide, we'll take a look at some of the data around productivity. So what we saw was that 85% of people report a perceived impact on their productivity. And the good news is that only 4% of people reported a decrease in productivity. So that's really good. When we look at the what they report positive influence on, the majority of people that responded to the survey reported an increase in code quality. So 59% of people reported that they're seeing a positive influence of AI on their code quality. And only 10% of people say that they observe negative effects on code quality. And if I'm being honest, that 10% was actually a bit surprising to me. I personally thought that number was going to be higher. Kind of curious what your thoughts on that 10% negative effects on code quality are, Eddie.
Yeah, I have had a couple of pilot programs with large organizations where we have seen this trend, and where we have seen it the most is in, for example, we had a client that was doing a Power Builder migration to Java, right? The problem was not that the AI models couldn't really move the code from, let's say, Power Builder to a new Java stack, but it was more about finding the right subject matter expert, human subject matter expert, mind you, to make this a go. So instead of being a positive influence, it ended up being a negative influence because we needed a lot of time to kind of train that model, right? So the productivity was much lower than if you say, hey, I want to convert something from more of a modern technology stack, right? That is one trend. And the other one was, it's not necessarily about the development in itself. It was even about the documentation, the requirements, how the product owner was building the epics and the user stories. You can leverage AI as well for that, but if you're just expecting the agent to take over and think for you, that's when things get into trouble.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned documentation quality because when you take a look at the research that we've done starting in 2021, I think was the first year that we started looking at documentation quality. It is a foundational capability that basically everything else is built on top of. And it's interesting because it provides an amplification effect on the positive impact that different technical capabilities have on the organization. So what I mean by that is if you were to get, X amount of positive impact on organizational performance by continuous integration, as an example. So if CI was leading to positive amounts of organizational impact, if you add high quality documentation into the mix, you get an exponentially greater amount of organizational impact from the practice of continuous integration by having strong documentation quality. And
Yeah.
and I thought that was really neat. And I guess even more to the point, what's also interesting is with all of the work that we do with customers, because one of the things that we do is we will come in and assess the customer's DORA capabilities and work with teams so that they can understand, what is the current state on the DORA capabilities and how can they begin to improve those capabilities. And I'm not exaggerating. Without fail, I've been doing this now for 3.5 years on Google Cloud Consulting. Every single customer we've worked with has reported having high levels of friction with documentation quality. And so it's just one of those things that I think is easily overlooked, especially for I guess more technical people. At least I'll speak for myself. I used to always take the position that my code was the documentation. And to be honest, I took that position up until 2021 when we did this research, and I realized, wow, how wrong I was.
Yeah, I know. And in fact, when we are implementing, for example, code migrations or efforts, or even when we are studying Greenfield, one of the first things that we do is really develop what is the type of documentation that we want, the templates that we want to use for that documentation, what do we want to populate them with, and make it as robust as possible. Because from that documentation, even it's possible to get not only the requirements for the development and epics and user stories, but it also provides kind of the guidelines on how the further development can be done on the product, right? And it is a living document. It is no longer sitting in the shelf collecting dust kind of a deliverable. It is something that is actually a living document. So I agree with you. It's super important.
Yeah, and that living document point, I think, is the key. As my technical writer friends will tell you, the minute a document is published, it is out of date. And I think that that's what a lot of people forget. So like going back to that 10% of perceived reduction in code quality or negative effects on code quality, hold on to that point for a second because we're going to kind of revisit this when we get to the AI capabilities, and I'll share with you what our research shows to how folks can actually improve that 10% number. But if we jump to the next slide, let's take a look at the outcomes. So what we always do is we look at outcomes. We want to know, what are these technologies, what are these things, these practices, what are the actual tangible things that they lead to, so that we can make recommendations to organizations. There's no point in really doing anything unless we can drive outcomes that are impactful to the business. So it's very clear that AI is driving individual effectiveness. That's what that top blue dot shows. If we ignore that top orange dot for a second and just kind of continue with the blues, we do see a positive level of impact on software delivery organizational performance, time spent doing valuable work. So teams are reporting that they're spending more time doing valuable work when they're using AI, which is great because actually last year we didn't see that. We saw less time or reported less time doing valuable work. So that's turned around this year. We also see higher levels of code quality, higher levels of product performance. We see a slight increase in software delivery throughput, and we don't really see any statistically significant changes on burnout or friction, which at first you might think, oh, no improvements. Yes, no improvements, but we're also not seeing any degradation either, which is good. So we're not seeing any increases in burnout and we're not seeing any increases in friction. So let's go back to that top orange bubble there for a second. So that refers to software delivery instability. So obviously instability is not a good thing. Instability talks about the change failure rate. So this is the amount of times that you push code into production, and that results in a service degradation that needs to be remediated, and also the amount of rework. So that's what that bubble signifies, rework and change failure rate. And we're seeing increases in this. So I certainly have my thoughts and hypotheses. Eddie, I'm curious to hear what you think about this and if you have any thoughts as to why this might be happening.
Yeah, I think that the way that I can summarize really in one word is context. Because many times when you see this software delivery instability, is because models will really spit out code that is based on whatever the model has been trained, but not necessarily based on the standards of the organization, based on how, on maybe even the libraries or the actual repositories that need to be used within an organization, right? So I see a lot of rework that has to happen because that context on how the organization build software is not included, right? And that's where we have seen a lot of that, errors moving all the way to production, or the overall CI/CD pipeline getting stalled because the entry and exit criteria in each one of the gates is not matching how the organization builds software. That's where I have seen a lot of the pushback.
Yeah, me too, definitely. I'm also seeing that that teams are really rushing into adopting AI tools to help them in the SDLC, and rightfully so, because we're seeing so many positive things that are coming out of this. Um, One of the things though that I'm seeing is that most teams struggle with automated testing. And what's happening is that now these teams are going 100% into adopting tools that allow them to write more code at a faster rate, and frankly, to push larger change sizes through the system, which is an anti-pattern because DORA talks all about shipping and working in small batches. But they're not really spending any of that time uplifting the underlying fundamentals, the automated testing, the continuous integration process. And so, what's happening is now we're just pushing more code into a system that's slightly fragile to begin with. And I think that's also part of it as well. But let's move on to the next slide. And because what we're going to do now is start talking about the AI capabilities. So for those of you that are familiar with the DORA work, all of our work really is the foundation of our work is based on DORA capabilities. A lot of people think it's the metrics. The metrics are really just a gauge that tell you whether you are making improvements in the capabilities. So the capabilities are really like the core, the heart and soul of the DORA work. And we've had the DORA core model for quite some time now, which effectively tells teams how they can improve their software delivery and their reliability. And so this year we wanted to explore, what do AI capabilities look like, and how can we extend the DORA model to be more specific around AI capabilities, and what are the capabilities then that we could identify that would amplify the impact that AI has on specific outcomes that customers care about. And so we started off with a bigger pool of capabilities. We kind of whittled them down. We tested a larger segment of these capabilities. And what our research shows is that these 7 capabilities that you see here on the screen uh, showed impact from an amplification effect for the outcomes that customers care about. So just going down the list real quick, we have user-centric focus. So this is, our team's user-centric. Are they building for the user in mind? Version control practices. This is the same as it was on the DORA core model. AI accessible internal data. So this means, do the AI tools have access to your internal data systems? And by the way, this is one of the key components to driving higher levels of code quality. Working in small batches, also a legacy DORA core model. A clear and communicated AI stance, quality internal platforms, and healthy data ecosystems. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see what that model looks like and how you can use this model. And so in the center are those capabilities that I just mentioned. On the right-hand side, those are the outcomes that companies care about. So a way to use this is, as an example, if you wanted higher levels of code quality, well, you can start with code quality and work your way backward and say, okay, then I will need better AI accessible internal data. If you wanted to build better products and you were looking at product performance, you could then also work your way backward and say, okay, in order to build better products, I need to work in small batches. I need a clear and communicated AI stance, and I need AI accessible internal data. And it's I won't go into all of the detail because we don't have that much time here on the webinar, but a lot of the things that we showed were really interesting. And I'll just give you one example. When we're talking about user centrism, what we showed was that teams that had user centrism really mattered how the performance of teams. So what I'm saying is, when you introduce AI into teams, if the teams are user centric, those teams will then be much higher performant. If the teams are not user centric, those teams will actually see a degradation of their team performance by adding AI into the system. So I think that's really important and really interesting as you're embarking on this AI adoption journey. Understanding the nuance around these capabilities and how you can set your teams up for success, I think is really going to be paramount to the overall organizational success. So speaking of this, I'm curious, Eddie, do you have any thoughts on this, or do you have any thoughts on how AI adoption is currently, supporting software delivery?
Yes, absolutely. If you want, let's move to the next slide. Within Deloitte, right, we are embracing AI fully across pretty much every domain, but particularly on the software development lifecycle. And as part of that, we have an internal accelerator we call AI Assist, which is an agentic assistant, really, to support every persona across the software development lifecycle. Everything from a product owner to quality assurance, to architecture, to UI, UX designing, to of course, the developer, and the list goes on, right? So this is not just about tooling, to be clear, right? Because there are a lot of tools out there in the market. I think the key is we make this work with the tools that clients are already adopting. So the key for AI Assist is the breadth of transforming the full software delivery value chain, integrating into existing tool and environments, and consistently learning how clients work. Like you mentioned in your report, the idea of looking at AI capabilities within, and what I mentioned before also in terms of context, right? Because these agents learn how the organization works. So, and we have seen AI rapidly improve every part of the software delivery lifecycle. We, in fact, have also on top of this, it's not being shared here, but we have we still call it a DevOps productivity dashboard, and we're looking at individual productivity, but we're also looking at quality, looking at what is the time, the effort saved. We're looking at not only, of course, DORA metrics, but also LLM specific metrics, like how accurate are the recommendations that these models push, what is the actual effort saved when you are implementing some of these things, so that we can actually measure what is the impact of adopting any of these agents that are very specialized in their function within the delivery process.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. So, like if I was a client, how would I actually adopt this, and what kind of benefits should I expect from adopting this?
That's a great question. If you want, move to the next slide. So the way that we're doing it is that really we're embedding AI into every stage of the SDLC. And the intent, of course, is to boost speed and productivity, right? And we have seen real gains in efficiencies, as you can see below. I'm not going to drain the slide, but I will provide some examples like requirements gathering, coding, and testing. You can see there, and you mentioned earlier, right? One of the key elements around testing, we can see that there is efficiencies from 40 to 60% just in test case generation and running. And we see on the product owner persona, right? And the idea, the capacity to create refine epics and user stories, all the way to 40 to 60%. And by the way, the ratios are, we see 40 to 60 because most times you get an initial high hit because you're reducing noise. But then as you mature the agent and the capability, you'll see additional gains. And this, by the way, these are not ephemeral. These are real results that we're looking at within our clients, right? And the way that we embed this, or we start, is really all the way from the planning and designing side, where we do the product strategy and design, all the way to how we operate, right? So we can have an AI-assisted help desk or that and the enablement of continuous improvement throughout the software development lifecycle.
Very cool. I like it. Let's move on. I know that we're kind of getting short on time here, so let's the last topic that we're going to talk about is platform engineering. One of the big takeaways this year was that developers look at their internal platforms not as a collection of tools or things, but more as a holistic experience. And so what this means is when you're building these platforms, you really need to focus on building these platforms as a product, and you need to focus on building these platforms in the most user-centric way that you can. And it's interesting because I work with a lot of companies that have, a great product management ability, but they don't always think about developing their internal products or internal platforms as products. They don't think of their developers as customers. So they focus on the product mindset from an external perspective, but not necessarily from an internal perspective. Another thing that we saw was a bit of an experience gap with regards to the platforms. Less mature platforms focused on the technical capabilities, and then as you grew through the maturity scale, those platforms became more user-centric. Let's move on to the next slide. And what we'll do is we'll show some of those outcomes that you can get from having well-built internal platforms. So we see high levels of individual effectiveness, high levels of organizational performance, high product performance, high levels of code quality, team performance. We do see a bit of instability. and we see a slight increase in throughput. Again, with burnout, it's statistically insignificant, which is good because we're not seeing an increased amount of burnout from using the platform. But I wanted to just kind of highlight on this instability here on the platform for a second. So um, those of you that are familiar with the work that we do, you're familiar with the fact that we have conducted a survey every year since 2014. What you might not know is a couple of years ago, we added a qualitative researcher to our team. And this year alone, we conducted over 100 hours of qualitative interviews to complement and augment the survey data that we conduct. And in the process of those qualitative interviews, what we began to understand was that this instability by using internal platforms is not actually a bad thing. The engineers are thinking of the platform as a risk mitigator. And so the platforms are allowing engineers to experiment more, to take more risks, to be able to rely on the platform, to be able to roll back and to fix and change things very quickly. So it's allowing that rapid iteration and rapid development that we want from our development teams. So in this case, while instability, is not good, we don't see this as a negative with regards to platform engineering in this case. And if we move on to the last slide, or the last slide that from the research, this was really interesting. So I mentioned earlier with the AI capabilities that internal developer platforms is one of the AI capabilities. And internal platforms seems to be the key to unlocking AI's impact on the organization. So in order to get organizational impact from AI initiatives, it is imperative that you have a well-built internal platform that is built as a product that meets the needs of your customers, which are the developers. Having these well-built platforms will really allow you to unlock that organizational performance. And again, I think this is really important as customers are embarking on this AI journey and going full speed ahead into AI adoption and rightfully expecting organizational performance to come out of this. Knowing what those underlying fundamentals that you also need to do, things like training those AI on your internal code systems, having healthy data ecosystems, having a clear and communicated AI stance, and of course, having well-built internal platforms is going to be the key to really driving that success that everybody expects through the adoption of AI and associated technologies. We can move on to the summary here. So just to sum up, think of the platform as a holistic experience. It's not just a set of features. It's a thing, and that's the way developers think about it. That's the way that they want to interact with it. I always say, think of your internal tools as SaaS products and develop and deploy them in that way. The platform should be the foundation for everything you do with AI. It's that strategic way that you can unlock that organizational performance and use the platform to help you mitigate and calibrate your risk and to help your developers move as fast as they possibly can in a well-regulated and well-governed system that they can quickly and easily roll back from. And next slide. I'll pass it over to you, Eddie.
Yes, of course. So I think it is a great part of the report. I'm very excited about seeing developer experience making it into it because, in my opinion, right, when you deliver AI capabilities, really there are three ways right now, right? You either deliver it as a plugin within your IDE, right? Which is an example of how we are doing it with AI Assist, right? Which is great as an individual kind of toolkit, right? That comes directly in IntelliJ or VS Code, whatever. You can also a browser, right? And we have some capabilities that we have been using to do that, like our automated tester. It's all like that, and even our SRE persona is that has agents that do chaos engineering and things like that. But there is also another way, which is through these developer experience platforms, which I think it is really very strong because it allows you to significantly improve organizational performance, product outcomes, and individual productivity. There are some trade-offs, but the overall impact acts as a very powerful force multiplier for business and for the well-being of developers. So we within Deloitte, we kind of drink our own champagne. We do this for a lot of our clients, right? We develop our platforms for them. We implement DevOps platforms for them. We have this agent creation experience that allows you to design reusable agents, and that contains really best practices throughout the development. We have also the product creation experience, which allows you to have a standardized approach for building agent-driven products, and even a sandbox experience, which allows you for experimentation. Now, all this is really based on user journeys, right? When you develop a developer experience platform, you look at the journeys by each one of these personas. So how do you onboard a developer? How do you enable their tooling and their environments and things like that, right? So in order to create this engineering foundation that provides a golden path for known engineering archetypes and still allow flexibility to adapt to constantly evolving technology landscape, we build these of experiences that really are based on curated paved golden paths that are backed by reusable components, templates, and scaffoldings and automations that are based on the way that we develop code, that we develop product, that are focused on creation, not necessarily only on consumption. That is API first, which is done mandatory. We are defining optionality and portability for each offering and services across the platform. And it includes really baked in processes that allows us to have a smoother experience, right, around security, performance, and quality, right? So the value of this really at the end is that you have an accelerated delivery, right, where developers can use these proven patterns and tools, consistency and compliance, because we are providing the right guardrails and best practices around the projects, including regulatory compliance. We have the flexibility to build depending on the type of engineering project or product that we are building, and have an improved developer experience that is with streamlined workflows. And really the intent at the end is to remove friction and freeing engineers to focus on innovation. And all this really accelerates the path to value internally and as well as for our clients. So this is how we are enabling this internally. Now, when you look at the architecture and how we have been building this, right, you can almost look like all these layers, right? If you look at it from a agentic perspective, right? At the very, very top, you may have products. On the second layer, you may have more like your base agent templates and utility agents. The next layer, you may have more like your LLMs, your APIs, your libraries, your data storage, and things like that. And at the very bottom is where you will have all these catalogs and operations and security, and the tool of registry and all these other things. So it is an evolving platform, but it is also an evolving field. And we are super excited to be in this journey as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Eddie and Eric, for the great conversation today. We just have a few minutes left, so I'll maybe just ask one question, and I'll allow either of you to take it, or you both can quickly answer. I think a lot of good insights on AI today and just the rapid adoption of AI in the last year. How can organizations prepare for the inevitable continued advances in AI and automation?
You want me to go first?
Yep.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
So I would say take a look at our AI capabilities and see, try to rate yourself on those different capabilities and reflect. And, one of the things that drives or that really enables organizational performance is having a healthy data ecosystem. And I would say that that's probably one of the key things that a lot of companies don't have currently. In order for AI to be effective, it needs to have a well-designed data marts and data stores that it can access in formats that are fairly universal. That's something that I see that's overlooked quite a lot from companies. So I would say start with the capability guide and also continue to focus on the fundamentals. Instead of going 100% into AI, maybe go 80% into AI and then spend 20% of that time working and fixing your continuous integration, your automated testing, working in smaller batches, these types of things.
So I know that I have like 20 seconds left, but I will say that preparing for AI and automation adoption, you need to develop a clear AI strategy, build the right data foundation, assess your technology infrastructure, and develop the right workforce skills and culture, as well as to establish the good governance and ethics around it. That will be, to me, like the initial immediate steps to take.
Thanks so much, Eric and Eddie, and yeah, thank you again to both of you for leading today's discussion. Thank you to everyone who was able to join. This concludes our webinar, but we'd love to connect with you afterwards. So if you feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or via email here, and look forward to continued discussion. Thank you all so much, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.